Hello,
Hello.
we are back and still without a theme song, so sorry.
Yeah, we're working on some sort of a theme song or jingle or something like that to get us to kind of interlude us into our sessions, but we don't have that yet. So
No. I asked my uncle, I said, can you play something on the guitar that's not copyrighted and sounds creepy? He's like, I don't even know what that means.
yeah, I know somebody that plays piano, so maybe I can ask if they can come up with some sort of a creepy little
Oh,
jingle of some
that might
sort.
that might work because let's be honest, unless you are in Deliverance, the guitar isn't super creepy.
Yeah, no, it's not. So maybe we'll try that. So that's that'll come at you guys at some point.
So listen for it.
Oh, so I've been kind of keeping myself a little just because I'm a bit scatterbrained sometimes, but I did have
No, you?
I know, who would have thought? I self-diagnosed myself with ADD today because I was like, I cannot stay on one thing ever, and then like I don't know. So I made myself some notes, but there was some. I'm sure that you've heard of most of the things I'm going to talk about, but I was super excited to kind of some things that have been going on since our last podcast. One of them was I'm sure that you saw Kim Kardashian kind of, I don't know if you follow her on Facebook or anything. I'm not sure why I do, but and she was kind of fighting for a gentleman named Brandon Bernard last week. Uh,
Okay.
I won't get into his whole story, but basically what was happening is, so he was executed last Thursday for a crime that he had committed when he was 18. And Trump actually rushed 5 executions to happen before his presidency is done. So Kim was kind of getting involved with that and trying to stop that execution just because based on the fact that he was 18 when that had happened, and that was, and now he's only 40. So I was kind of following that story a little bit, but then I kind of went down a bit of a hole into this is the first time that executions have been rushed since like in 130 years due to a presidential changeover. And this in 2020, there was 10 executions, which is the most that have happened in a year since 1896.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so I thought
insane.
that was kind of notable.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I know. So I was kind of following that a little bit, and then that's probably why it took me so long to get today's episode done. Going down all
Be-
these other little like side streets of information.
you're like a squirrel. Or
Yeah.
no, you're like a dog following a squirrel. Not a squirrel. Although
Um,
squirrels are squirrely too, so
and then some of the other exciting things. So one thing I just found out today, super pumped to tell you. I hope that you haven't seen it yet because I'm sure you'll be just as excited. So, but to back that up a little bit, tonight on Netflix, the series The Ripper has
yes.
started.
I
So
haven't watched it yet, but I didn't realize it was coming out now. But I'm really excited because I just saw that it was coming out.
yeah, so that started today. So I'm hoping maybe after a recording, I'll watch that. And then the one I got actually super excited about, just saw the commercial for it today. Night Stalker, A Hunt for a Serial Killer, January 13th on the Flicks, and Richard Ramirez. I am so excited.
How do I not know that these things are coming out?
I'm not sure. I follow a lot of morbid pages on Facebook, so
Oh, me too. Did I
um,
tag you in the one for Jeffrey Dahmer? There's one coming out about him too.
yes. I'm like, oh my God, I'm excited to watch that too. If my excitement sounds almost like I'm crazy, but you get it.
I do.
But,
There's another one that I just saw that's coming out by the same people that made The Act. It was, oh, I need more details on it, but I will find them and I will bring them to you because I feel like they did such a really good job on it or on The Act that I feel like they can possibly do it badly.
I wonder, yeah, let me know what that one is and you find it. Because
Yes, I
I'm
will.
make myself a little list of things to watch here. But January 13th, I will probably watch that entire series in one day.
Uh-huh. Oh, full disclosure. So everybody that joined us last, because this plays into all this Netflix and documentaries and stuff. But last episode, I mentioned that they were coming out with the Selena series. Do you remember that?
have you started it?
I binged it. So
Did
of course I did.
you?
Full disclosure to anybody that is a true crime junkie and not a Selena fan, you might want to wait until future seasons come out. I personally am just super excited because I liked the story of Selena. Like, I liked her life story and how she got to where she was. And so I've enjoyed that. The guy that plays her dad, I can't remember his name, but did you ever watch Desperate Housewives?
I've seen a few episodes, but not enough to like tell you anyone that was in that.
Well, one of the housewives was married to Carlos. It was his name. He was a Spanish guy and big macho. He was supposed to be the big macho guy. And
Okay.
I loved him in that. Well, he plays her dad in this, and he's so good and so funny and very much a stereotypical Spanish dad. So it's been fun to watch, but there's nothing about the crime yet. The only thing they've done is introduce her murderer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's probably a bit of a slow burn that way, I guess.
Yeah.
If they're hoping to kind of drag the series out a little bit, but I actually haven't even started that yet. I'm not really sure what I've been doing, but watching just figure out what's coming out on Netflix, I guess.
You've just been watching the previews.
Yeah.
No, I like that. So that was fun.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad that you started. How many episodes that you binged?
I think it was 8 or 9. I watched it all. I'm done until next year when they bring out more.
Next year. I hate when they make you wait a year. It's like, it's so mean.
Well, if they wouldn't release the whole season all at once, it wouldn't be such an issue.
I know. I think on other streaming platforms that sometimes they release things like once a week. Actually, no, my kiddo used to watch The Flash on Netflix, and they would only put out one a week.
Yeah, there's some that do.
Yeah, I see. That would irritate me as well, though. Like, there's no pleasing me, really. Like, I'm mad at myself if I watch the entire series, and then if you only give me one per week, then I'm going to be mad at you. So.
Oh my gosh. And this is why I've gotten to the point where some shows I just won't watch. Like, if it's a big show and everyone's like, you got to watch this, I don't start till it's done because there's no point. I just want to watch it all in one shot.
Oh, exactly.
That's what Rob and I are doing right now on Crave with Ray Donovan. Have you watched that?
No.
Oh, it's good. It's good. It's Liev Schreiber and what's Angelina Jolie's dad's name?
Couldn't tell you.
He's very famous. He's super famous. All on his John Voight. I love him.
I don't even know who that is.
So go watch Ray Donovan because he's amazing in it. He's so good at being that greaseball dad. It's just so good. It's so good. Ray Donovan, he's supposed to be like this fixer for Hollywood. Like, if you accidentally killed a hooker, you call Ray Donovan and he comes and cleans up the mess for you.
Oh, he's one of those guys.
He's one of those guys.
I'm already sold.
But in episode 1, his dad is released from prison, and you find out that Ray is the reason he was in there for a murder that he didn't actually commit. So he went to jail for 20 years for something he didn't do. So he gets released, and now he's got, like, they have to deal with the family dynamic of the dad who went to prison for his son for something he didn't do. It's so good. It's so good.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to give that a watch.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, do you have any other updates or fun things to watch?
I do. It wasn't a fun thing to watch. So do you know anything about the app Hoopla?
No. Hoopla?
So I decided that I was going to try listening to audiobooks because I love to read, but I never have time to read because I'm always either working or kids, right?
Yeah.
What I decided to do, I was going to do Audible, and then my girlfriend says, well, if you're not sure if you're going to like audiobooks, why not just try Hoopla? And Hoopla it's like the audiobook version of the app for your library. So you go on and you can find all these different audiobooks, and just from your library, whatever your library has in stock, I guess is what they call it. And you can borrow them for 21 days and you can listen to them and then you return them. And you have so many that you can do a month.
Interesting.
Well, I tried it and I tried like just something easy to listen to, something smutty, just to see if it was any good. I didn't like the narrator of the first book I did, but it but it was a romance, and I didn't realize how smutty it was until they started talking about penises and rubbing up on each other, and I was at work without my headphones. So I had to like turn it off and panicked search for my headphones in the office to try.
Oh my goodness.
Because we both know I'm not turning it off.
No. Yeah, at that point, once you've gotten to the penises and the rubbing, you're 100% invested. So keep going.
You just gotta finish at that point. Anyways, this is murder related or true crime related because the next book that I listened to was a better narrator, and it was actually called The Family Next Door, and it was the story of the Turpin family, which is relatively recent. Do you know that one?
The Turpin family. Why do I know that one?
It is recent. This is the couple who kept their 13 kids.
Oh my God.
Captive?
Yeah. Yes, their friggin' house of horrors, and their kids never got to go. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And their family photo is chilling because what, like, it's so terrifying. Like, first of all, if everyone has to dress the same, no.
No.
Like 15 people. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. It's really, really good. The book gives you a bit of the backstory of more on her. Like there's a lot of history on her family and not as much on him, but you kind of see not why, because there's never an answer why, but in her case you see why, like where her
brain
went exactly where it went wrong. You can almost pinpoint exactly where it went wrong in her life.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really good book. I enjoyed it. So yeah, check out Hoopla and listen to all the creepy stuff, but don't listen to the smutty books because it is very, very uncomfortable to listen. It's one thing when you read it and you're like, oh, this is sexy and hot or whatever. It is very different to listen to someone say it out loud in your ears.
Excuse me, sir. I did not say you could say that in my ear.
Right?
Yeah, noted. I'll just listen to the creepy stuff.
Yeah, just stick to the true crime. Although let's not go too deep into the like bad ones, because I feel like that would be equally as uncomfortable as listening to someone narrate how someone got dismembered or something. So,
not. Oh boy.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess if that's it. I did watch a really sad documentary on Amazon. I won't talk a lot about it, but it just kind of, because we're talking about exonerations, this kind of does highlight injustice, but in a different way. I don't know if you've seen it yet or not, but it's called No Place to Hide, Rehtaeh Parsons, her story.
No.
It's really sad, like really sad. So she's raped by a bunch of guys at a party in high school. And no one's like formally charged with anything. No one kind of takes her serious, and it ends up leading to her suicide. So there's a lot of like, they kind of go into her story and what her parents were trying to do, and it just showed like even Facebook groups made like making fun of the whole situation even after that. It's just it's super sad and very heavy, but it was still a good watch in a weird way. So prepare yourself if you're going to watch that one. But it popped up somewhere, and then I watched it, I think, last week, and it was very sad.
Okay, well, it's on my list, but trigger warning acknowledged.
Trigger warning for sure. But yeah, on that note, I guess, so we had said last week that this time we would focus on exoneration stories. So I guess I can kind of give you the DL on mine. So actually, originally, I was going to focus on one particular story, and I was actually kind of going the Canadian way. I was looking up some different Canadian exonerations that had happened, and there was one story that stood out to me a lot. However, while I was researching that one, I ended up down this huge rabbit hole of like all these different websites and like looking primarily so all of them focused on Dr. Charles Randall Smith. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you, but he was the lead pediatric forensic pathologist at the Toronto Hospital for Sick Kids. He had that title from 1982 till 2003.
This does sound familiar.
Yeah, I'm sure that it does. But so this is sort of where I ended up going with my portion of this, just because I was like, I'd heard about all this sort of when it was happening. However, I would have been pretty young, you as well, when this was actually going on, but it totally captivated me. So a bit of a spoiler alert, he is known as a disgraced former Canadian pathologist. Start with that. This was right up the alley of exonerations, and I just kind of wanted to focus on this aspect of them.
Okay.
So Charles Randall Smith, he started his pathology path when he became a certified anatomical pathologist in 1980. I looked that up because obviously I wouldn't have no idea what that means. Basically, it means he was his certification was for diagnosing disease after death. So looking at different organs and tissues and that kind of thing. So that's sort of where his specialty was. He began working at the Hospital for Sick Kids in 1981 with an entire team of different pathologists. However, he quickly became the one that was conducting the autopsies on children who suffered suspicious or sudden deaths. And in 1992, the Ontario Coroner's Office created a pediatric forensic pathology unit within the hospital. And Smith, he became the director of that unit right away. And he became pretty much the only one in Ontario that was conducting any of these autopsies. As you can guess by his title, Disgraced Former Canadian Pathologist, he had several wrongdoings during his career. And so this led to some destruction and obviously in some people's lives. Questions started to kind of rise about him in 1991. So there was a family in Timmins and they raised concerns about his original autopsy because there was a 1-year-old boy that had died in the care of a 12-year-old babysitter. He had fallen down a flight of stairs, and that's what she had said to police and his parents and everyone. But Smith, when he did his autopsy, said that his injuries wouldn't have been from falling down a flight of stairs, and they would have been more in line with being shaken. So therefore, she actually got charged with manslaughter at 12 years old. And there was many experts at the time that disagreed with him, and the family went bankrupt trying to protect their daughter. And that's just sort of the beginning of the terror that happened on his path. So this is all, as you guessed, he is a pediatric forensic pathologist, so this does involve child death. So if that's a trigger for you, again, I seem to keep talking about this. I promise my next one will not be. But if that is a trigger for you, then I would suggest that you skip my portion of this. In 2002, they kind of came at him and he was warned about being overly dogmatic and a tendency towards overstatement within courts. Nothing really kind of came of that. And shockingly at one time, and this will become shockingly once I tell you sort of everything that happened due to him, but at one time he was the lead in all of Canada. And yeah, so that's a little bit scary once I tell you everything else. I was kind of looking through some other resources and stuff, and this isn't to excuse him in any way at all, but I guess during his time in pathology, they were often taught, especially in child stuff, they were often taught to assume that the child had been harmed on purpose until they could prove otherwise. So he was kind of in this culture of assuming guilt more often than not. And because of that, sort of while he was in court, he was not ever objective like you would need to be as an expert in a courtroom. And so instead of just providing the review of his information and expertise, he would offer, statements and opinions on things that were way above his scope. And it's noted that he would often act as a prosecutor rather than sort of an expert or a witness in these rooms, but he was still one of the other things about him too is he also misplaced a lot of evidence, a shockingly amount, a lot of evidence. I guess his desk at work was a complete disaster, and so I think a lot of it somehow gets blamed on that. However, he did omit some facts from courtrooms often when he was, in there as an expert, so that's obviously a little bit shocking. So yeah, like I said, in 2002, he was warned about sort of how he was being in the courtroom, and then by 2003, so again, he started in 91, 2001 as the lead guy, and it took until 2003 before he was removed from performing autopsies.
So many people.
Yeah, so by 2005, the Ontario chief coroner at the time started to investigate Smith, and at that time reviewed 45 of his child autopsies that had been completed from 91 until 02. Out of those 45, 20 had significant issues and 13 led to convictions.
13 people potentially.
13 people had convictions of murdering their child or a child due to his autopsies.
Wow.
Yeah. And once he had been, he resigned from his position at the hospital before they fired him, I guess. But he takes this little leap from Ontario to Saskatchewan, and he decides he's going to just try to practice pathology there. Neglected to tell anyone he was under investigation. So he lasted there about 3 months. I don't know if any autopsies were performed in that time or anything more about that, but I do know he was trying to continue working.
So here's my problem with this is there's such thing as the College of Physicians, and that has to record every time that you come up on any sort of reprimand, right? Like, it's all there. I've even seen doctors, because I work in the medical office and I am administrative, so I have gone on the CPSO. I can't even count how many times, the CPSO being the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Ontario. And even one doctor who had an affair, like the whole story is on there because the affair happened with a staffer, right? No, with one of his staff. So that's on there. So if you are being not convicted, what's the word I'm thinking of? Accused.
Yeah.
Of these discrepancies, why the hell would the people in Saskatchewan, why would they not? Check the CPSO.
So obviously there's flaws in the system, clearly. This point. So in 2007, Judge Gouge, there was an inquiry from the public which started because of Smith, and it actually it started with Smith and looked at kind of like, how the hell could this guy have so many issues in his practice yet continued on for this long? It ended up taking a look at like the way medical experts work within the court systems, and looking into, the Ontario system in all of this to begin with. So out of that entire report, I guess the judge had 162 recommendations based on the way that this stuff has been done in Canada, which is terrifying if you think about it. And so then that judge kind of dove into concerns around Smith and the shortcomings and the systemic failings that would allow him to continue for so long. And then finally, in 2011, he's stripped of his medical license, and he was found guilty of disgraceful conduct and incompetence. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of information on some of the stories that really stand out.
Do some of these have good endings, like happy endings? Because we need some happy.
Well, everyone does. Eventually, they are found innocent. That's a happy ending. That's not to take away everything else that obviously happens with them. So it was a local case, and Smith ended up being the pathologist on it. And so in June, this is the case of Louise and Sharon Reynolds. So in June 1997, 7-year-old Sharon's lifeless body is found in the basement of her home. They had just moved into kind of recently. Kingston police back Charles Smith because of his pathology report, and they then agree that right off the hop Sharon had been stabbed, and they blame her mother. And so her mother Louise is arrested for the murder. So all of these, not only did you just lose your child, but now you're being deemed the person that's caused this death. So it's just unbelievable. I can't even imagine. I can't even. Smith's autopsy came into question after a few years. The only cool part of this is that, so Vancouver's Rick Ferris, who was a pathologist, he was actually involved in the Dingle baby case in Australia in the 80s.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So he becomes involved in Louise's case about her daughter. So he starts looking at the autopsies, and they're like, this isn't making any sense. So he disagrees with Smith and stated that Sharon's wounds were actually consistent of those with dog bites. So afterwards it comes out that there had been some evidence that was discarded. One was sort of a mold of the top of her head that just was lost, so never brought into court actually, and he misled the courts very strongly. So this happened in 1997, so it wasn't until 2001 that all charges were dropped. But unfortunately, at that time, Sharon had lost custody of her 4 other children and had already spent 2 years incarcerated and then had lived in a halfway house after that. So that's what gets the ball rolling on sort of what is actually happening with this guy's information that he's bringing forward. So that would bring me to Maureen Laidley. 1998, she was caring for her stepson, who was 3 at the time, and actually his father was in jail on a murder charge and was also cleared of that by 1999. But Terrell, I guess, had jumped off the couch, slipped, hit his head on a marble coffee table. Obviously, if you've ever been around marble, it's pretty freaking strong. Dr. Smith stated that the injury itself could not possibly cause death. And so a year after his death, Maureen was charged with the murder of Tyrell, her stepson. A seasoned Crown prosecutor asked for a stay on this and stated continuing with the legal proceedings might lead to a miscarriage of justice, as many other experts stated that the death, in fact, was consistent to the injury that Maureen had described in her initial interviews. So she don't think she actually ended up serving any jail time. However, she had 2 other children that were apprehended by CAS, and she wasn't allowed to visit with her kids alone for 3 years, even after the charges were dropped. So you can imagine even that in itself, the damage that it does to that family.
You can't fix that.
No, you can't. Like, it's like, oh, this is this is so terrible, all of this. So William Mullins Johnson, so he's babysitting his 4-year-old niece Valen and her 3-year-old brother. He was living with his brother and his wife at the time in Sault Ste. Marie. So he's with them, hangs out with Valen for a few hours in the evening, puts her to bed. She had a bit of a fever before bed, but he didn't really think anything of it. Anyways, the mom walks into Valen's room in the morning and finds her covered in vomit and obviously not breathing. So at that time, a Sault Ste. Marie local pathologist actually conducted the original autopsy. However, Smith gets involved. I'm not even sure why, along with 4 other specialists. Smith was the only person out of those 6 people to state that the little girl had been sexually assaulted at the time of death and that strangulation was the cause of death. So keep in mind at this time, Smith is at the peak of his career and he's like the highest one in Canada. You know what I mean? Like, everyone believes his word. So even though he's going against all of these other people, and William, so he said that strangulation was the cause of death. And anyway, so William, he was the only one at home during that time with the children. So subsequently, he's arrested and found guilty of 2nd-degree murder and is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. He's convicted with no evidence linking him to the crime. His lawyers tried to have his name cleared by DNA technology. However, Smith misplaced the tissue evidence that was sent to him from the first autopsy.
Now, is this misplaced or quote unquote misplaced?
Well, the funny thing is 11 years later, it magically shows up in Smith's office, so he's able to hand it over at that point.
Interesting.
I know. So another doctor conducts an autopsy and shows that there's actually 0 evidence that Valen had ever been sexually assaulted or murdered, and Smith's findings were completely inaccurate, and by 2007, he is exonerated. That's not to mention that it tore apart his entire family, ugh.
Of course.
I'm just going to ramble these off. So Sherry Sherritt is another poor soul affected by this man. In June 23rd, 1996, she finds her 4-month-old baby, Joshua, not breathing in his crib. He's pronounced dead at the hospital. Smith conducts an autopsy and states that the cause of death was a skull fracture and that he had been smothered. Sherritt is convinced that she needs to plead infanticide at that point in time to not risk 25 years in prison, because Smith has been convicting everyone. So basically she doesn't stand much of a chance. And she's been told that she's done this to her baby, right? She does take the plea and states that she is guilty of infanticide, and she's sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years probation. The decision was almost made solely just on Smith's autopsy report. So Sherritt Sherry, I guess her first name, Sherry, had to give up all the rights to her older son that she had and agree to have zero contact with him until after their 18th birthday. And then she was also listed on the child abuse registry at that point. Joshua's body was exhumed for further examination. When that was done, it concluded that there was in fact no skull fracture and no evidence that she had harmed her baby. So they think that Smith somehow in this case confused what the normal gap of a baby's skull would be compared to a skull fracture. So by December 7th, 2009, she's finally exonerated. Brenda Wadby, January 1997, she leaves her 2-year-old daughter Jenna with a teenage babysitter, comes home to an eerily quiet home. She finds that Jenna had been beaten brutally and just left there, and the babysitter is nowhere to be found. Jenna had many head injuries and rib injuries. Smith conducts his autopsy and reports that many of Jenna's rib injuries had actually happened over time, not just the ones that had contributed to her death, but stated that the other ones that he was looking at would indicate that Jenna had been abused many times prior to this incident. So that at that point, Brenda's kind of coerced into admitting to a child abuse charge rather than take things through the court system. Because they said if she ever wanted to see her other 2 children again, that's the only way that would happen. So in 2005, the 14-year-old boy that had been babysitting, he admits that murder to an undercover officer. And in 2006, that boy is actually convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 22 months. Also, during the time that he was sort of reporting his findings on Jenna's autopsy, there was 2 other pathologists that completely disagreed with Smith and stated that there is no forensic evidence that would support the claims of ongoing child abuse. However, Smith again was believed, and they believe that his findings were accurate. So Anthony Caporto, probably not pronouncing that right, Angela Vino. In 1997, their 3-month-old Athena was found dead. They had stated that she had a lacerated liver, bruises on her head, and 35 rib fractures. However, Smith didn't tell the courts at all after his autopsy until about a year later about the liver injury, which I'm not sure why he would leave that out. So in 1999, Anthony was charged with the murder, and in 2000, Angela, the mother, was charged in relation to their baby's death. Smith was asked to provide his findings in writing from the autopsy, and it took him 7 months to produce his initial autopsy report. And then when he brought in the liver information, it took him until 2000 to write an 11-page amendment containing new information. So because of the length of time that had passed, all the charges were stayed in that case. So Anthony and Angela walked free. I couldn't really find much more information on that, to be honest. I'm nearing the end here, I promise.
So many people. Oh my God.
Yeah. So next is Dinesh Kumar. So Dinesh, I hope I'm pronouncing that right again. He immigrated to Canada with his wife and son in 1991. And in February of 92, their second son, Gaurav, was born. March 18th, Gaurav woke up crying. That evening, Dinesh fed him, burped him, and put him back in his crib around 12:30 in the morning. Shortly after, the baby wakes up and screamed a chilling baby scream. Dinesh and his wife, Veena, they rushed into the room to find that, their baby wasn't breathing. They weren't aware of the 911 protocol in Canada because they were new and no one had gone over that with them. So he called his brother, and his brother directed him to call 911. The paramedics take the baby to the hospital, and unfortunately he passes away 2 days later. CAS at this point had taken their older son on child abuse suspicion, and Dr. Smith concluded from his autopsy that the baby had died from shaken baby syndrome at the hands of his father. So in June 26, 92, he's arrested and charged with second-degree murder. At that point, they offered Dinesh a plea of criminal negligence causing death, and he decides to take that plea and plead guilty to that to avoid the potential of a long prison sentence, which could also lead him to possible deportation and not even being there to support his family. So he's sentenced to 90 days in prison, which is served on weekends. May 28th, 2007, the Innocence Canada Project agreed to reopen his case, and 5 experts at that point testified that the cause of death was actually undetermined, and it might have actually been a hemorrhage that had happened at birth. So in 2011, Dinesh, he's exonerated, but by then his life had already been turned upside down, his community had turned against him, etc. So in February 1991, 3.5-year-old Cassandra Shepard, who was the stepdaughter of Maria, she began having serious health problems. During that time, she was hospitalized for a month and then released. Weeks after, she became quite ill and was vomiting and in and out of consciousness. So she's then taken to the hospital and ends up in a coma. And 2 days later, she's removed from life support. So the following day, Smith conducts his autopsy and noted that Cassandra had died from multiple head blows, and one specifically that appeared to be the size of Maria Shepard's watch. And he was blaming all of that on Cassandra's brain swelling and leading to her death. So Maria is then arrested and pleads guilty to manslaughter, as she was warned she wouldn't stand much of a chance against Dr. Smith, and fear of losing her other children to the system, which we've seen in the other ones that I've talked about. So she's sentenced to 2 years less a day. The Innocence Project, so Innocence Canada, they get involved with her, and by February 2016, they're able to exonerate her. So the findings of the autopsy are stated that his opinions were considered extremely unreliable and pseudoscientific. So the other pathologists that got involved, that's sort of what they said afterwards. They're like, this guy literally has no idea what he's talking about. A cool fact about that, though, is now Maria Shepard sits on the board of directors for Innocence Canada, and
that's
she's
really cool.
Yeah, so she's kind of taken what's happened to her, and now she's helping other people that are in similar situations. So yeah, that's good. And then so this is the one that actually got me going on this path in the first place. So it's Tammy Markart. So what stood out to me about her was poor Tammy spent 14 years in prison.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is where this all originally started, and then I started going off on Dr. Smith. But she served 14 years in prison for the murder of her son at the time, and he had epilepsy and was known to have seizures and stuff, but he had gotten caught up in the blankets, and when Tammy went in to see him, she was panicking and called 911 trying to get him out of the blankets, but she couldn't calm down enough to follow the CPR instructions.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, he passes away. Smith, he concludes that actually her son Kenneth had been smothered and it was not accidental. She's charged with second-degree murder. On October 25th, 1993, she's convicted of that murder. And it takes until 2007, when they're kind of looking over things again, the chief coroner concluded that Smith's findings were completely illogical and against any scientific evidence-based reasoning. And so June 7, 2011, she's finally exonerated. Out of those people I chatted about, the exoneration or Innocence Canada, they helped 4 of those individuals. And since 1993, they've helped to exonerate 23 innocent people.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a journalist that does a whole story on all of this, and it's called Death in the Family. So I was kind of watching an interview with him, and he took he was really intrigued by this and really wanted to help the family. So there's a few interviews of him and some of the families that I think Brenda Woodbury, when she was released, and just kind of talking to them. And it's extremely heartbreaking, really. And if you think about the injustice just from this one man and all the people that had to go through all of this because of him, and I'm sure that's not even everyone.
Well, and there's the other side of it, is all the people whose cases are now being relooked at that shouldn't be.
Exactly. And are people going to maybe walk free, or did they walk free because of any of his mistakes?
Exactly.
So it's just, and it's terrifying to think that all of that power could be put in one person's hands. You know, the fact that in a lot of these cases, there wasn't any evidence at all. And they just, even though there was people disagreeing with him, they just took his word for it.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
No, so there's obviously, flaws in the system. Yeah, and I think it wasn't until January 1st, 2010, at that point, they would start to require experts to sign an acknowledgement to make sure that they are aware of their duty in court and to present evidence that is free of opinion and objective and nonpartisan. That's not even that long ago.
No.
And the other thing that's a little worrisome too is actually Canada doesn't have any forensic pathology training opportunities. At least from what I read, it might have been an old article because obviously a lot of these are, but what I had read is that most people have to travel to the US or otherwise to get trained in forensic pathology, which is a total different ballgame from what he was originally trained in.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Sad to think that all of that happened. So anyways, I know I took a different, quite a few exonerations there, but basically I wanted to kind of just highlight his involvement in that and found that extremely shocking.
Sheena, I said pick one.
I couldn't. There were so many.
That is crazy. And I had heard of him, but I didn't know the extent of that.
Yeah. Super devastating.
Very.
Eventually everyone is, get their freedom back, I guess, but still at that point, like 14 years incarcerated for something you didn't do. Like, oh.
You can't get those years back. You can't get that life back. You can't get your kid back. And now, yeah, that's awful.
Yeah, extremely awful. Anyways, on that note.
Well, that part was fun. Mine, I went a little all over the place. There was a couple different exonerations that I had watched documentaries on. One of them was the one I had been talking about on Crave, about the teenager who was accused of molesting a child that was in the daycare that he was living in at the time. So that's a really good documentary, but it's not the one I decided to go with. Instead, I went with another case, and I was on the fence about this one as well, because while it is an exoneration, it wasn't one where the guy had been exonerated after he had spent a long time in jail. He actually didn't spend that long in jail, but the case is so good, and the story is so crazy that I couldn't skip it. I called my friend and I said to him, I'm like, what do you think? Because it's not like, it is an exoneration, but he was exonerated during preliminary. He wasn't actually exonerated after being convicted.
Okay.
So he's like, I think you're splitting hairs at this point. That story is really good. Just go and do that story.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Have you watched the documentary on Netflix yet? It's called The Long Shot.
No.
Okay. Well, I'm about to ruin it for you. Sorry.
Okay.
And
I have a Netflix I need to watch on Netflix, so it's okay.
Well, this one is really good, and it's actually pretty short, and there's a reason for it. The documentary, when Netflix made this documentary, they thought it would be able to win awards, but if they made it longer, it was going up other contenders like the Stephen Avery, Make a Murder, that kind of stuff.
Ooh.
Yeah, so they wanted to make it short enough that it could kind of stand out in a smaller genre. So they went with 40 minutes. So it's quick. It's quick. So anybody that wants to watch this documentary, it is very, very good. Very well done. Stop listening now because I'm about to ruin the whole thing. And if you'd rather just hear me tell you about it, still go watch it. But keep listening and then go watch it after.
Everyone stay and listen to Crystal.
The Long Shot. So in 2002, Martha Puebla, she was out with a friend. While they were out, a local gang called the Violin Boys, whatever happened, her friend ended up being murdered. Her friend's name was Christian Vargas. He was shot and killed. And in the process of taking the murderer to court, they called her to testify in the preliminary hearing against Jose Ledesma and Mario Catalan. During the preliminary trial, she basically said she didn't clearly see the shooter, so she wasn't able to identify anybody for them. So her testimony was actually not very useful to either the defense or the prosecutor. So she couldn't see them clearly. So her testimony was essentially not really useful. Mario Catalan, he had called his family and asked if they would come to the hearing because it looks better to the judge when you have family support sitting in the audience. And honestly, it probably made him feel better that like he was on trial for murder, right? Chances are he probably wanted someone there for his own knowledge, just to have someone around. Well, his parents couldn't go, but he had a brother named Juan, and Juan volunteered to go support his brother. So he was in the room when Martha was on the stand giving her testimony. Now, a little while later, on May 12th, 2003, somebody drives past Martha's house slowly, like they're casing it, and then stops, parks, gets out of the car, walks straight up to her and shoots her while she's sitting outside of her home. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Neighbors see it happen. People were around when it happened. Now, flash forward 3 months later, and on August 12th, 2003, Juan Catalan, so the brother of one of the accused people that Martha was in court against, comes home from work and is met with officers there at his home to arrest him for Martha's murder. So they took him down to the station and questioned him, and he obviously denies any involvement in her death. The detectives that were on the case said that there were witnesses that had worked with a sketch artist, and the composite that they drew had resembled Juan. So when they showed the witnesses a picture of Juan, he had been positively ID'd as the shooter by the witnesses. The theory that the police had come up with was that Juan had shot Martha in retaliation for testifying against his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Through all the questioning and accusation, Juan maintained that he was innocent. Now, when they go to court, the prosecutor in Juan's case was charging him with first-degree murder, and she was seeking the death penalty for him. So Juan called his lawyer, and the lawyer that he called, his name was Todd Melnick. He had actually been his lawyer before because he had been picked up on marijuana charges. So he called that lawyer, and Todd Melnick said right away he knew that Juan hadn't done it. So he told Melnick that he didn't kill Martha, and he had actually been at a Dodgers-Braves baseball game the night the murder took place with his cousin Miguel, his friend Ruben, and his 6-year-old daughter. He said the game had run late, with the Braves hitting 7 runs in the bottom of the 9th. 7 runs being in at the bottom of the 9th when they were tied before that. It's one of those things that gets people riled up. People remember that kind of stuff, right? So it was something he had remembered quite clearly. That
You'll have to explain what that means to me when we're not recording. I don't know.
So a game of baseball has 9 innings.
I know that.
And each team plays for half of an inning, right? At the top of the last inning of the game, both teams were tied.
Oh, okay. I got it.
At the end of the 9th inning, the team that won got 7 runs in. So that's a lot of runs. And there's your lesson on baseball for the night. Anyways, the game had went overtime. So they were late leaving the stadium. On his way out of the stadium, he stopped and bought his daughter a pack of baseball cards. And then he called his girlfriend to let her know that they were on their way home. He then dropped Miguel off on his way and didn't go anywhere else that night. He went right home. The prosecutor he was up against, her name was Beth Silverman, and she had a nickname of the Sniper. And the reason for that was that she had never lost a death penalty case.
Oh,
yeah.
As soon as you said her name, I was like, oh, I know. That's mean.
Yes. Well, she looks mean. And in the best circumstances, you want that, right? Like if she's going for the death penalty on someone that's truly guilty, you definitely want someone who's called the Sniper. You want someone who's going to win that case. In this one, not so much. Now they're going through, and his lawyer is going through and just collecting all the evidence to try and prove his innocence. So he has Juan's girlfriend find the game tickets from that night, but he knew that it wasn't going to be enough to prove Juan innocent because he knew that the prosecutor was just going to say that the ticket doesn't mean anything. You can have a ticket to any game. It doesn't mean you actually went. So then the lawyer went down to the stadium to see where Juan was sitting during the game and took some photos for reference. He sat down and watched hours and hours of game footage from all the different angles. Because whenever there's a baseball game, they record it from every possible angle, right? So that they don't miss any great shot. Makes sense, right?
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's dedication.
Exactly. Like this lawyer went above and beyond. So they watched all of these different footages, hoping that they would have some sight of Juan. And they did. So you can see him in the footage from the stadium, but it's so low quality that the prosecutor just said it could have just as easily been someone else. That's how bad the resolution was. You can tell, like I've seen the video and you can tell it's him, but
it's just not clear.
Yeah, it's not clear enough to see to see distinct features of him. Then he even went as far as to pull the records of who was sitting around him and was able to connect with a bunch of people that sat around Juan during the game. And while many of them did say that they saw him, they weren't confident enough to go on the stand and say that. Do you remember anybody you've sat beside at a concert or anything? No. Same idea. They weren't willing to testify in his defense. The prosecutor then went on to say that Juan was never actually at the game, that he was lying about it because when he was first arrested, he never even mentioned the game. So she said that he must have been lying about that. But Juan says that he was in shock and didn't think of it at the time. They do pull his daughter up on the stand at age 7.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and she does. She goes on and she says she remembers the game. She remembers getting ice cream and buying the baseball cards. The lawyer, because I actually listened to a podcast called Big Energy Doc, I think is what it was called. So she interviewed Todd Melnick and Juan Catalan. They said like the daughter was really, really nervous, but I guess Juan really liked the movie Big Daddy. And do you remember, it's a good movie, right? Well, you remember the scene at the end with Julian when he has to go up in front of the court and talk about his time with Sonny?
Yeah.
Well, they used that for her, and they explained to her how it was the same idea, and she just had to go in there and do the right thing, and it's really cute.
Oh, you wear the sunglasses?
I don't know if she wore the sunglasses. But yeah, so they were able to get her through it by comparing it to that, which I thought was super cute.
Oh, that's super cute.
So even with all of that, he still knew he needed more. All his proofs seemed to come up just short of clearing Juan. So he asked him to think hard again about anything that he may have forgotten that could prove his innocence. So Juan remembers that when he took his daughter to go get a snack, and when they came back, there was security blocking the aisle to their seat. He thought maybe someone was filming something because he kept seeing the same man walking up and down the aisle as if repeating it for multiple takes. So Melnick went back to the stadium and checked with the media relations person, and sure enough, HBO had booked in to film an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
What are the chances?
Right? So, Curb Your Enthusiasm, for anybody that doesn't know, is a show that is created and starred in by Larry David, who also created Seinfeld, which is super cool. And the lawyer then contacted HBO, who did say he could have the footage, but they didn't want to give it to him until after the episode had been released. This
priorities.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You can sit in jail just as long as it takes for this episode to air. Somebody ended up taking it to Larry David, though, and he actually overrode that decision and approved the release to Juan's lawyer without the waiting period. So HBO sent Melnick 8 tapes with 6 minutes each on it recorded, and on those tapes multiple times you can very clearly see Juan and his daughter. They can be seen coming back to their seats from the concession stand, and he appears in multiple other shots ranging in time from 8:45 to 9:15, which proves that Juan did in fact go to the game. The problem with all this was that at 10:32 was when the murder took place. So in the prosecutor's eyes, any time after 9:15 is fair game to get home, and that would have given Juan enough time to actually get there and still have committed the murder. Considering the fact that Miguel lived on the same street as Martha, prosecutor believed that the footage actually proved nothing, and that Juan would have been at the scene at the exact time that Martha was shot. So she actually said the timeline added up based on the fact of where Miguel lived and the time that Juan had actually thought he had dropped off Miguel. But Melnick's not stupid. So he remembered that Juan had said that he had called his girlfriend when he left. So he called the cell phone company to figure out which towers the call had pinged off of. Found out that he was actually still standing outside of the stadium at 10:12 p.m. to make that call, which wouldn't have given him enough time to get home or to get to Miguel's house, drop him off, and then murder Martha. It just wouldn't have been enough time at that point. So during the preliminary hearing, the judge reviewed both the cell phone records and the game footage and dismissed the case right there on the spot, which is great, except at this point, Juan had already spent 6 months in prison So he had already lost that time, and he had already been accused of murder, right? Like, you can't fix that.
No.
So what he did do, though, is he did sue the city of Los Angeles and the police force because they were able to prove that the detectives that had been in the room with him when they took his statement had actually been trying to coerce a false confession out of him. The city... Pardon?
There's so many times that they've done that. And I'm like, oh, you're not supposed to.
Well, I'll get back to that because there's more to that,
Okay.
of that exact topic. Juan won his case against the city and was actually awarded $320,000 in a settlement from the city of Los Angeles. And after he was released from prison, the FBI was able to gather enough evidence to prove that 3 members of the Vineland Boys had actually been responsible for Martha's death. So they were on the right track. They were trying to find someone related to the original case.
Yeah.
In relation to the murder. They had just really looked at the wrong person. The detectives, now this is where that comes in. So the detectives who had interrogated Juan when they first arrested him, they were also involved in the case against his brother and the other guy who had been charged with Christian's murder, the original murder. They had falsely told Juan Ledesma, the second guy, they had actually falsely told him that Martha had ID'd him in the murder for her friend, trying to get him to confess. So they had done it twice. They had tried to do it to Juan Catalan, and they had also done it in the previous case to Juan Ledesma, which ended up being the cause of Martha's death.
Oh.
Yeah, it's awful. Those 3 gang members are now serving life without parole.
Dang.
Yeah. Now, there's a little bit more to this story. This is just something I heard on the podcast that I thought was kind of interesting. So Juan had received the $320,000 settlement. Well, Beth Silverman, the prosecutor, later on in her career, she actually filed a sexual harassment suit against the prosecutor's office. And guess how much her settlement was for that?
Oh, boy.
$700,000.
Damn.
Yeah. So when you compare the two, not that I'm saying a sexual harassment case, it's not the same. It's comparing apples and oranges. But he spent 6 months in jail.
Yeah.
And it was not valued anywhere near what that sexual harassment case was.
Damn. Yeah. I mean, there's no amount of money that could ever make it okay. That's not fair.
Not at all. Something else that happened that it's in the podcast, but I couldn't find anything on it, so I will reference it, but I don't know how accurate it is. And there's a lot of resentment, I think, between Melnick and the prosecutor's office. But something that he said happened was during the preliminary hearing, he had planned to bring, I can't remember if it was Miguel or Ruben, in as a witness saying, yes, I was with Juan and he wasn't there and all that kind of stuff. Well, this information got released to the prosecutor's office, and it just so happened that the police went and picked him up on stupid charges the weekend before he was set to appear in court. The theory was that they were trying to either make him miss the hearing or make him show up in prison blues, which wouldn't have looked as good for Juan. But when the judge saw what he was being brought in for, he didn't even hold him. So he was released right away.
Those skeevy guys.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. But you can't say that that's what they did, but it's very convenient that happened right before he's supposed to appear in court. Yeah. So that was my story.
Well, yeah, that's a hell of a lawyer. Good for
I know.
him for putting that together. Well,
and he still works on cases like that now. And according to their conversation on the podcast, they're like great friends now.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, they've stayed connected and they've become really good friends. They have dinners together, and it's kind of neat to hear that part of it. So.
Yeah, that's good that they stay connected that way, that he's still helping on cases like that. Because his last name's Milnick, every time you say it, all I picture is from 2.5 Men, Judith's husband she gets with. I think his name's Dr. Milnick.
Yes!
Whose line is it anyway and stuff? I keep picturing his face. I can't think of his real name, but.
What is his name? It's funny though, because actually, Todd Milnick kind of looks like that guy. Not Harry Styles. Yes, Harry Styles, or not Harry Styles. Something Styles. You're looking it up, aren't you?
I am, and I know there's this awkward silence. Ryan Styles.
Ryan Styles. I knew it was.
You were back.
They don't look super alike, but if you look up Todd Milnick, like similar look.
Well, I'm happy that at least At least with exonerations, people do eventually get let free. It's just devastating what can happen to their lives in the meantime, and some hefty prison sentences.
I know. And it's life changing. And for some people, they never make it out. They never, in their lifetime, they don't see the vindication. So it's not always 6 months in jail. It's not always 12 years or 14 years in jail. Sometimes it is your life. And then after you are gone, that's when they find out the truth, those are the worst ones.
I know. I think it was the Innocence Project in the U.S. rather than the Canadian one. But I think I looked on there and they assumed that it was like 2.5% of the jail's population was innocent. So I think it was somewhere around 120,000 people in the United States are in jail and they're completely innocent.
See, that is enough people for me. Like, people I guess I don't understand the death penalty, because I look at it and go, if there is that 2%, yes, 2% is low, but do you want to be in that 2%? Do you ever want to be wrong about that 2% and find out that you killed an innocent man or woman?
So that whole case that Kim was helping on, I mean, he wasn't completely innocent, but, had served his time in jail
All right. Well, that is all I had. Sheena, did you have anything extra?
No, I think that's it. I will try to get a couple episodes of The Ripper watched and let people know my thoughts on that.
That sounds like a good idea. Let me know how that goes, although I'll probably just end up also watching it. Well, if that is everything, I think I will go take my hamster to dance lessons.
Oh my God. I told my friend what I said, and I think she said something about her taking her rabbit to skating practice or something, and I was like, oh my God, like, what have I started? Yeah, my animal has no extracurricular this evening, so we're good.
Do you even have any pets?
I don't.
That's awesome. I love it.
I'll get one now, but...
We forgot to talk about the thing.
What's the thing?
The thing that we're going to do with the show.
Oh, right. I'll let you take the lead on that.
One of the things we decided we were going to do is we were going to split this show into a two-parter. Basically, what that means is that we will pick our topic, which we haven't also done. We will pick our topic and we will do 2 episodes, one a week. 1 week you will get the Sheena show, and the other week you'll get me and my story. And so we will take that topic, split it over 2 weeks, and you will get more like a half-hour show once a week instead of this longer show that we've been doing every 2 weeks. That way it's a weekly thing. We can get it out more frequently, but also doesn't have much more of a time crunch for us, and it splits us up a little bit. We thought we'd do that next, but we also didn't pick our topic.
I think because when we posted on social media, we had a few people say that they'd love to hear like a crazy survival story.
Oh, yes. I love survivals.
Yeah, I do too. Like I love that the person survived it. I actually watched, I'm not going to say it right now, but I watched a crazy documentary of a woman that survived. So that might be my story, but I do like them because just the strength and the power that these people have within them to survive some of the situations they've been through it's insane.
I like it. Okay.
And when I listen to them, I give myself notes of how I could survive things. So it's good.
Of course you do.
100%.
So tune in next week and you will hear one of our survival stories. Not our survival stories, because I didn't survive shit.
You'll hear a survival story. Oh God. This is tapering off.
Okay. Tune in next week for somebody with a survival story.
Bye.
Bye.